Good morning from sunny Kansas City. Welcome to Sports Beat Live, our weekly conversation and therapy session with the Royals. Uh, we are here with the writers who cover the team, and we want to talk to you as well. So send us your questions and comments. We'll get to as many of them as we can. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, the University of Kansas Health System, and you'll hear from them later in the show. So we've got Sam McDowell, Vahe Gregorian, and Lynn Worthy with us today. Lynn, I believe you're just getting back from the ballpark after last night. Um, so I was in downtown last night, and it was pouring when I started to make my way back home about 8 o'clock. And so that turn on the radio, and I get the weather delay. The uh, you know, as I drive home, I live in the south part of the metro area. No rain at my house, none. It did not rain at all. And the Royals are in a 2-hour rain delay, so it was kind of like a West Coast game last night for the Royals. Started about 9:15, and as is the case with most West Coast games, I was asleep by about the sixth inning, and I didn't miss much. So, Royals lose again, 8-0 to the Toronto Blue Jays to drop to, I don't know, was it 17-36, worst record in the American League. No dancing around it now. None of this. Tied for the worst record. Only ahead of two other teams or something. They are solidly in last place in baseball. So, I thought today maybe we would talk about the future of the team, what in the immediate future, and what the trade deadline might bring to the Royals. So let's start with this, though. Lynn, you were at the ballpark last night, and let's talk about Daniel Lynch just to get things started. That's the second rough outing in a row for him. I think started really fine, got through the order one time looking sharp, and but then the home run ball got him, and he ended up 5 2/3 and 6 earned runs for the second straight outing for him.
Yeah, going into the sixth inning, he'd only given up was it 3 hits? It was 3 runs on 3 hits that far into the game, and then in the sixth, gives up a home run and then a 2-run home run. And all of a sudden, you look like maybe he might be looking at a quality start. 6 innings, 3 runs. And that went out the window, and he doesn't make it through the sixth inning. Now, Toronto also, I think, coming into last night, had fourth most home runs in the AL, and they'd had something like 22 in the last 11 games, or it was something ridiculous like that, some stretch they've been on. And they've got a lot of guys in that lineup. I mean, it was interesting looking at some of the stats because we've talked so much about the Royals' situational hitting and not getting any guys in with runners in scoring position. The Blue Jays were like one of the second to last in the AL in runners in scoring position. They just do it. They just do it with the long ball. They don't worry about manufacturing anything. They don't worry about moving guys over. They just hit the ball over the fence. And that's what they did to Daniel Lynch.
Yeah, look, they came in hot too, just what the Royals needed, right? A hot American League East team coming in. They'd won 8 of their last 10 going into the game. So it was the first of 3 games. They play again tonight, I think Wednesday afternoon, before the Orioles come in over the weekend. So, Sam, reason to be concerned about Daniel Lynch, and we kind of the Royals pinning a lot of hopes on this young pitching staff, and Lynch had been the one who hadn't been sent down, who had shown some consistency, and unlike Brady Singer and Chris Bubich and Carlos Hernandez, Lynch had I don't believe he'd missed a start, and it was somebody who I don't know if you can count on, but when you saw his name in the probables, you think, well, the Royals have a shot tonight, but that's not been the case the last couple of outings.
Yeah, I think there's reason to worry about the entire pitching staff. I mean, when you looked early in the season, a month through, you really thought that the big league staff's only pitching success stories were Brad Keller and Daniel Lynch. And, Keller's ERA is about doubled since then, and Lynch has given up 18 runs in his last 4 starts, which have only spanned 18 2/3 innings. So his ERA is about 8.9 over his last 4 starts. And you look at May, obviously last night was his first start of June. You look at May, and I think hitters were hitting like 360 off of his fastball. which I told Lynn last night at the ballpark. I go, well, they're hitting 360 off of his fastball in the last month. He goes, yeah, well, they hit the changeup out and the slider out tonight. So I said, well, it's equal opportunity now among his repertoire. So yeah, I think there's definitely a reason to be concerned because Lynch is now part of a pattern of what we've seen from their young pitchers, which is the ones that have done well in the minors, or even when they immediately come up to the pros, have not improved, and instead they've often regressed, and they're and at ages where they should be making progress and they should be getting better.
Yeah, Vahe, other teams' pitchers progress. It doesn't seem to happen here. Although, in fairness, Brady Singer's had some very nice outings. Got smacked around pretty good his last time out. Rinse, repeat. But look,
but there is something about that, Blair. That I mean, he got better in the minors. I mean, he was throwing his changeup, and I think when you talk to people with the Royals, they'll tell you they should have back in 19 had him throwing a steady diet of changeup, so that maybe what we saw when he came back up to the pros this year, he would have been better equipped to do that earlier in his career. But still, I mean, that had to happen in the minor leagues. That's not something that he was able to figure out at here in Kansas City.
Just to add to that point a little bit, Sam, you used the term they should have made him. And it does just make me think a little bit about at what level. I mean, it's just a microcosm of it all with Singer, but, insistence on such things versus suggesting such things may be part of the problem. I mean, the absence thereof. I could be wrong about this, but I have the feeling Singer is basically reset right now, and that other game the other night was an anomaly. I could be proven wrong totally in the next few days, but that there seems to be a direct result of specific emphasis with him, and so we'll see what that means. But Blair, to your broader point, other teams have staffs that progressed. It reminds me of you in like a 2013 game. I remember we were sitting there, and whoever the Royals were playing, it hit like 3 straight homers, and you just kind of did the sigh and said that why don't the Royals ever have any of that? And soon they had some element of that, their own version. But it does feel a little bit like you can see all kinds of reasons for stuff getting clogged and stalled and kind of in between phases here, but it doesn't really answer the question of why other teams seem to progress and the Royals are just, I keep telling myself they're kind of stranded between phases here. But you don't know what's going to unlock it.
I like that. I like that that imagery, stranded between phases. That's kind of exactly where they are, aren't they? Well, and listen, it's hard to come up with highlights after a one victory week since the last time we talked. They did look good in that game. That was the Saturday win over the Astros. But it seems like every time we get together for our therapy sessions here, the Royals have won 1 or 2 games. So it's hard to pick out highlights for this team.
It reminds me of a Ned Yost line that he told us like his last year, where we walked into his office and he said, "I'm tired of playing like a good football team," and nobody really replied. And he goes, "Did you guys catch that?" And he goes, "What does a good football team do?" And, what? He goes, "Wins once a week."
I was going to say a line like that and pass it off as my own work. But maybe Ned planted it. I was going to say it's not unlike the Chiefs. They win about once a week.
Well, it was. I think I was saying this to Sam yesterday. Or maybe it might have been you, Vahe, where I was saying how Sunday could have really changed things a bit, because if they were able to pull out a win on Sunday, then you would have been looking at things saying, well, they had 3 of their young guys go and took 2 out of 3 against maybe the second best team in the AL, because you had Singer, Singer, Bubic, Heasley is what you had over the weekend against the Astros, who, I believe have the second best record in the AL, or at least at the time, I'm pretty sure when they came in, they did. And obviously Singer had a rough outing, the first one since he's come back up, but Bubic, who had been shaky, pitched 5 scoreless and didn't even really have his fastball, and then Heasley gave you a quality start, not the greatest, but that game really got away more so with the bullpen because it was still a close game. Salvi came through and sort of made it competitive at least, and then the bullpen gave up some runs late. And it's probably fair also to point out, like we talk about, what maybe Singer should have been doing or what Bubic should have been doing. And I think it, again, fair to mention this is where what we've heard from Dayton sort of comes in is that those guys were jumped ahead. And when we talk about Lynch had been the one who had been more consistent until this last little stretch here, he was the one who had more of the traditional, even with the COVID year. They didn't rush him to the majors. He had time in the minors. He came up last year and then went back down after they had the tipping thing. So he spent more time in the minors than the other guys did, and he's been more consistent. And maybe there's something to be said for that because the other guys, Bubic jumped from single A, Singer from double A to the majors.
So that relates to a question that Matt asks, involving Cal Eldrid. Do we have a sense in the clubhouse about Cal's job? I mean, I think. I mean, why don't you grab that? I just don't see anything happening this year, but who knows? I mean, we'll see. We're actually going to mention Terry Bradshaw here in a little while and how he still has a little bit of influence on this team. But how about Cal Eldrid?
Well, from the front office's side, at least, they've been pretty adamant that they're standing by Cal. I mean, and once they fired Terry Bradshaw, in my eyes, that opened up the door to question, okay, what's going on with Cal? What's going on with the rest of the staff? And so we did when they everybody was available after the Bradshaw decision, and they've stood by Cal. They seem to have continued to stand by Cal. They, and of course, pointing to the fact that they had rushed some of those guys. You had a lot of guys who were unproven, unexperienced. So the expectations for them had to be way different than, when you look at a lineup where you've got some established veterans in it. So I don't see, at least not in season, something changing, especially after they already made that one in season change.
Okay. All right. We build this as the trade episode, and we'll get to that after we take a break and hear from the University of Kansas Health System.
March 4th, 2015, I got out of the shower and felt a lump in my left breast.
We were able to quickly uncover that she had 2 subtypes of breast cancer, each of them requiring separate and unique treatment plans. This is why you come to the University of Kansas Cancer Center.
It is critical to be treated by a team of experts in that specific cancer type. If you don't start with us, I think you'll have more questions than answers.
Why would you go anywhere else?
Okay, we're back on Sports Beat Live, talking Royals with Vahe Gregorian, Lynn Worthy, and Sam McDowell. And you send us your questions and comments. Okay, guys, trade deadline's not until August 2nd, but I think the Royals are clearly going to be in the seller's market here. And is it the right time to begin talking about it, thinking about it, acting on moving some pieces? And if that's the case, what would be the objective for the Royals right now? Sam, what do you think?
Well, no, I don't think it's the right time. I think 2 months ago was the right time. I think, the problem is when teams want to make deals. And, if the Royals got a good offer for Andrew Benintendi now, they would move him. They've been trying to move Carlos Santana for a long time. We know that, but we all don't think he has value. And I think the market's telling the Royals he doesn't have value. But Benintendi, I think, is obviously going to be the major one with him being a free agent next year. But hypothetically, if you've got a hole in your corner outfield right now and you're a contending team, first of all, if you're a contending team, you probably feel like, okay, we've gotten by without that position so far. Let's see what the next 6-7 weeks we can get by with. Maybe one of our young guys develops. Maybe an injured guy comes back. And so there's not a lot of urgency for opposing teams to make those sorts of deals right now, but there will be. I'd still be really surprised if Andrew Benintendi finishes 2022 with the Royals. But the bigger decisions are going to be on the guys that, they have more than 1 year of control under. And that comes down to, guys like Scott Barlow, Brad Keller, and whether or not the Royals are going to be willing to move guys like that.
Yeah. Look, I'd be surprised if Benintendi was a Royal after August, but who knows? I mean, it's stranger things. He won his arbitration case with the Royals this year. $8.5 million. Royals don't usually lose those things; they usually settle them. But he's getting 8.5. And I think we've all seen some of the teams associated with Benintendi, like Cardinals. I've seen the Braves, Blue Jays, even the opponent right now. Several others that could look for a corner outfield. What Benintendi has done this year is really impressive, right? I mean, and I know that Lynn, you're pretty familiar with his career arc at Boston, wasn't he? He had a swing tailored for a little bit more power, but now playing in Kansas City, we're not seeing that, but we're seeing a terrific stroke, and he goes to the opposite field as well as anybody on this team. Although I should say Nicky Lopez doing a good job in that department as well recently. But anyway, Benintendi, he certainly has increased his value this year for the Royals. And Matt again asked, what if the Royals end up moving him, what's a reasonable return on someone like Andrew Benintendi?
Well, in my mind, I think what you're looking for if you move him is probably pitching, whether that's minor league pitching. I mean, because right now with the position players and the guys that you still have trying to find room for. To me, it makes sense that's pitching is what you're looking for. And with Benny, obviously, I mean, the thing that you also have to keep in mind is it's for a contending team. Yeah, he's a valuable piece. He's going to be a free agent at the end of this year. So, I mean, there's the plus and minus of that they're not tied to him at any sort of long term, but they also don't have control of him past this year. So it's not, so sometimes that's, if he had another year, then maybe potentially you can demand more because they're going to have that much more time of him and his production. The team who gets him is only going to have those couple of months when they get him. But to me, it makes sense for them to go get pitching because I've felt, and nobody has said this, but I felt like they probably had already been planning that, okay, next year he's not going to be here, and they have different options for the outfield, whether that means Dozier, whether that means part-time, Melendez out there, whether that means Isbell. I felt like they already had options in mind for next year with Benny gone. So I never really thought that, extension was really going to be a part of the discussion or anything like that. So again, that's not something that was told to me. I just, as you see how things are going, it seemed like it made sense. And so, especially for a guy who's going to be a free agent, I don't think you're getting major league talent back for him. I don't know that they really want that. I would think pitching has got to be what you're looking for there.
Benintendi, Vahe, isn't he? He's just one of the guys who, when he comes to the plate, you think, well, something good could happen here. There aren't, the Royals lineup isn't full of those guys, but he's been one of those guys.
He has been, and it's look. I mean, you could flip the argument a little bit and say, well, if they could afford him, wouldn't that be nice to have him be a bedrock for the next 3 years, let's say, and a nice piece of something stable that it seems like you could count on. And I don't think that'll happen, but the problem is there's very little to count on right now. And that's why I like that thought that, having some cornerstones, having some building blocks that you can feel would be in place could be very, very essential to this team and in allowing some of these other guys to come up and have their ups and downs. But I just don't think it's going to work that way. And it takes me back. Maybe I'm just saying it again because you liked it, Blair, but that idea that they're stranded between phases. I mean, that's just another example of the place where they're kind of gridlocked.
Blair, I think it comes down to how bad are the Royals willing to let this year get. I mean, they're on pace to lose 110 games, which is 4 more than they've ever lost. And we're no longer early in the season. I mean, we're in June now. So, Lynn and I have also talked about this. The Royals wouldn't get any better by trading Andrew Benintendi or Scott Barlow or Brad Keller. They would undoubtedly be worse this year. And how much does that matter to them? I mean, from the outside looking in, I don't think there's a lot of difference between losing 100 and losing 105 to 108. I mean, you're in last place or in last place. You could even argue it's better to lose 108. You're going to get a higher draft pick and probably get in that top 3 lottery. But I know that this is a prideful front office, even when things aren't going well, and I could see them really not feeling great about being on pace to lose 110 and trading guys that are preventing them from losing 115.
Yeah, I mean, from what we know of, Dayton Moore, JJ, the front office, I don't think it's going to be a move guys early just for the sake of moving them early. It's going to be, I mean, I think Dayton always uses the phrase like you make the move when you have to, or when it comes down to that point that you sort of have a deadline or that sort of thing. And I think they're going to try and probably ride it out as long as they think that maybe they could start playing better. But there will be a point too when they sort of get a log jam, because I mean, we've talked about it and I've written about it recently with some guys coming back. Another guy probably end of this month, Edward Olivares comes into the picture too, and that's another outfield spot that people forget. At the time that he got hurt, he was probably the second best hitter in that lineup along with Benintendi. And at that time, they were probably the only two who were really hitting because everybody else was slumping. Witt has obviously come on really hot since then, but Witt was slumping, Salvi was slumping. And he's one of those young guys that I know folks have been clamoring for, and everybody was all been out of shape that he wasn't playing more last year, and he was on that Omaha shuttle. But it's probably end of the month that you're looking at him coming back, and you've got MJ playing some outfield, Isabel. So I mean, that could – I don't know if that's going to force their hand, but that might factor in too, is just trying to clear room for some of these guys.
Something I think about when I see them pitch is, Sam mentioned these pitchers earlier, Scott Barlow, and I'll throw in Josh Staumont as well. Barlow's lost a little bit on his fastball, hasn't he? And at Staumont, it's just, just a little kind of maddening to see what's, it seems like he flashes great potential and then he doesn't. So I think about those players in terms of their peak value and what they could bring back for the Royals, or if they're part of the plan going forward. But it just, like so many other facets of this team, it's just not going as planned, not going well and not going as planned. So just something else to consider. Think about this as well. Royals who have been traded became World Series MVPs. Talking about Ben Zobrist for the Cubs and Jorge Soler for the Braves last year. So Andrew Benintendi has that perhaps to look forward to if he is traded. I can see him as a World Series MVP potential. Consider this as well. So I was looking up some, just trolling around on Baseball Reference before this, and I mentioned earlier that the Royals have won one game since the last time that we spoke. In the games that they didn't win, they never led in any inning after any full inning. So not only are they losing, they're not giving their fans much hope in losing either. They have not led after a full inning in any of the games that they've lost since the last time we spoke. So tough sledding for the Royals. Very tough sledding. So let's
they've eliminated the problem that we last spoke about, which was blown leads.
Not a bullpen problem. Right. So Lynn, you wrote about this. I thought it was interesting. Salvador Perez was in a really nasty slump upon his return, but got a couple of big hits over the weekend, a couple of home runs, including the big home run in the game that they did win on Saturday against the Astros, and just brought back the power and looked good at the plate. And I just thought it was pretty interesting that when you asked him about it, he said that he did talk to Terry Bradshaw, the hitting coach who had been released by the Royals about a month or so ago. So did that surprise you a little bit to hear Salvi reference the former hitting coach?
I mean, it did and it didn't. I mean, I didn't expect, obviously, we're talking to him after he had a good game, and you expect him to talk about feeling better with his swing and whatnot. And all of a sudden, Terry Bradshaw's name comes up, and it wasn't asked about it. So it's one of those ones where, as a reporter standing by the locker, you hear that and you say, oh, I think I'll be writing this. But yeah, but the reason it doesn't surprise me is just the fact that him and TB go back to the minor leagues. And he talked about last year when he was having that historic season, tied the franchise record for homers and tied for the major league lead in homers and led the majors in RBIs. During that season, he talked about TB. He talked about having that familiarity with him going back to when he was at AA. I think that was 2011. And then TB being with him the last few years in the majors. I mean, you look at Bradshaw was there. Now Salvi's won 4 Silver Sluggers. I think Bradshaw was there with him for 3 of them, including last year. And that's, and obviously Sal missed all 2019 with the Tommy John surgery, but, TB would have been the hitting coach then as well. And he really last year talked a lot about how, he was trying to be more patient and he was really game planning more. And the game planning stuff was really where TB was with him. I mean, TB sort of, simplified things, boiled stuff down, however you want to word it, as far as, okay, in these counts against this pitcher, this is what they're going to probably look to do to you based off of what we've seen, how they've approached similar hitters and whatnot. And so for an aggressive guy like Salvi, it just sort of made it where he went up there and he's going to swing no matter what. But when he goes up there and has a pretty good idea what he's looking for in a certain spot and he's swinging, that's where you saw balls that were outside the strike zone, but he knew he was looking for it and he'd hit it out of the park. That's where you saw, 96-mile-an-hour fastballs up and out of the zone, and he's taken deep because he just has a good idea of what he's looking for. And so it wasn't shocking that he would talk to TB. It's probably more surprising that he just sort of mentioned it to everybody in passing. And he also did mention, John Mabry. We should leave him out because really for the last couple of years, and I think we mentioned this when they did fire Terry Bradshaw, is for the last couple of years, every time you've heard players talk about the hitting coaches, they were talking about TB and Mabes because Mabry didn't have that title. His title was Major League Coach, but he's really been working with the hitters up until the change that they made.
Good stuff. All right. I think this is the week the Royals turn it around. I think by the time we talk next week, they'll only have 1 loss, and we'll be talking about a hot Royals team. Glad this is not being recorded. All right, for our panel of Vahe Gregorian, Sam McDowell, and Lynn Worthy, big thanks to Monty Davis, our producer, and the University of Kansas Health System as the presenting sponsor. This has been Sports Beat Live, talking Royals, and we will do it again next Tuesday.